Hello. Have you ever thought about how technology affects our ability to do math and the types of math that might be impacted by better technology? It wasn't so long ago that an abacus was a great way to do certain types of calculations. And then paper came along, and for a while it was controversial which one was better, but eventually paper won out as the better way of doing math. And then as things got more sophisticated, we got tables so we could do trig functions and logarithms. And then slide rules were an improvement on that. And of course, these days we have even more sophisticated technology to really help us push the limits of math that could have been impossible just 100 or 200 years ago. So chapter 3 is all about technology and how that can help our modeling skills. And so we're not going to do every possible technology in this chapter, but there's a few that will be particularly helpful. And so just as a starter, let's look at a quote from T.C. Chamberlain that says, "The fascinating impressiveness of rigorous mathematical analysis with its atmosphere of precision and elegance should not blind us to the defects of the premises that condition the whole process." And that's a good thing to remember as we get more sophisticated technology that can hide the math that's lurking behind it. We can get more and more precise answers, but they could actually be less and less accurate. And that can be misleading because the precision gives an atmosphere of accuracy that may not really be true. So be careful as we learn these sophisticated and powerful tools that you remember that underlying that whole process are some assumptions that may or may not be completely true. So for our video today, we're going to look at a spreadsheet. And to help us get a sense of what the sort of basic things a spreadsheet can do, we're going to look at the following example. It has 3 parts, but it all revolves around the idea of calculating how much it costs to drive a car. In the first example, we're going to calculate the total cost as a function of miles in the car that uses miles per gallon, and the price of the gasoline will be the 3 variables. Then we will present that in table and graph form to help us see the relationships better. And then finally, we'll create a 2-dimensional table that will give us a quick implementation of calculating the price per mile under the 2 conditions of how miles in a car varies and how the price of gas varies. So let's take a look at our spreadsheet now. All right, so here is our opening screen for the spreadsheet. And I'm assuming that you're completely new to a spreadsheet, so this will go into all the basics, I hope. For our purposes, we want a blank workbook, so I'm going to open that up. And if you want it to be a little bit bigger, you can zoom in. That's up to you. And so now let's jump into what do we actually want to do. We want to have a place to input number of miles for our trip, miles per gallon, and so forth. So I can just type those in the first few cells. So number of miles, miles per gallon, price of gas, and then the output that I want is total cost. Okay, and so notice that my text has become larger than the space of the cell. So if I come up here between A and B and double click, it will automatically widen the cell, so I don't have that. And now the nice thing about this is I can type in whatever numbers I want to figure out the price of the gasoline. I'm going to assume I have a 2,500 mile trip. My car gets 35 miles to the gallon, and the price of gas, let's say, is $3.29. Now, presumably we've already gone through the modeling process and we found a model, and this is just a way of implementing that model. So we don't actually have to do the calculations by hand or with a calculator over and over. We can let the spreadsheet make the calculation once and then quickly change the variables as we need to. So what's our formula for the total cost of the gasoline for our trip? It's going to be the number of miles divided by the miles per gallon times the price of the gas. And the great thing about the spreadsheet is I don't have to actually type in those numbers. I can type in the address of these cells. And the address of this cell is B1. So I can type in B1, and then divide by B2, or I can just click and it does B2 for me, and then times the price of gas, which is B3. And it's not case sensitive, so you don't have to worry about uppercase or lowercase. If I hit enter, I get $235. And so that is the answer for part A. Notice if I wanted to change my trip, let's say it's only going to be 2,000 miles, I can see how that changes the price of the gas total. Or maybe that's not changing, but maybe my car gets better gas mileage. How much am I going to save? I'll save about $30 if I can go from 35 to 40. On the other hand, if I go from 40 to 20, it's going to, not surprisingly, double my expense. If we want to have a dollar sign there to emphasize that we're looking at dollars, we can do that. And we can even emphasize that we have exactly 2 decimal places. Okay, and so any of these can be varied. So that's part A. So let's do part B now. So part B, I'm going to open up a new sheet. So by the way, terminology-wise, this entire file that I opened up would be called a workbook. This would be a worksheet, and this is a tab. If I wanted to name the tab, I could by double-clicking on it and call this part A. And then I could create a new tab and a new sheet and call this part B. And let me put this back to where we had it. So let's say I wanted to reuse this, so I can highlight it all and then copy it. And then I can go over here and paste it. But in this example, I don't want to paste it exactly as is. I want to paste it doing something different. And there's a variety of options. One that's particularly nice is paste values if you don't want the formulas anymore. But the one that we want is transpose. And I can double click here to make sure all my columns are appropriate width, since all 5 columns were highlighted. So notice I have the exact same thing as before, but it's been transposed. What used to be columns is now rows. And if you want to center this, you don't have to, but sometimes that makes it look a little better. I can click center. And there's lots of little things you can do like that. You can make this bold if you want to. If you wanted to have a line underneath, you can do that. But those are typically optional because they're not going to change the actual math. Okay, so what is the advantage of doing this? Well, the nice thing is now I can make columns for various things. So for instance, I want to change the price of gas. I want to start at, let's say $2.50 might be the cheapest it can get. And I want to see how things will vary as it increases by 10 cents per gallon. So what I can do is I can highlight those 2 cells because that's going to tell Excel the pattern of what I want. And then I come down here until I get a black plus sign, click, and then drag. And notice it shows me how far I've gone, 460, 470, 480, 490. I'm going to stop at $5. Okay, again, if we wanted to emphasize that that's dollars, we certainly can. Okay, and then for now, I'm going to leave these 2 constants. So I can highlight those and just double click and notice it, fortunately, kind of reads my mind. It assumes I want to just keep those numbers constant all the way down, and it did. And so the nice thing is now I can see how the total cost is going to vary based on this one price of gas, and I don't have to keep typing in new numbers. So I can come over here, get the black plus sign, click, drag, and now I can see how the price of gas can vary anywhere between $178 all the way up to $357 for this trip of 2,500 miles. So that is a table. If we wanted to see a graph, then we could highlight this column and then hit Control, hold down Control and highlight the second column. And then I can go to Insert, and I want to scatter plot. And I'm going to pick straight lines. And notice I have a graph here automatically that shows the relationship between the price of gas for 1 gallon versus the total cost of it over the whole trip. And it's linear as we would expect. Now, what if we wanted to change to seeing how miles per gallon affects our cost? Well, we can certainly do that as well. So if we want to keep this at, say, $3, okay, and then let's say we want to start at, pick a number that you prefer, maybe 15 miles to the gallon, and we'll increment by, say, 2 miles to the gallon. All the way up to 65. And then what I can do, I'm going to delete this. And now I can highlight this cell, this column. Hit Control again. Whoops. If you use your mouse scrolling, you will affect the whole zoom. All right, I hit Control, hold Control down, move this down, insert another scatter plot with straight lines. And now I have the relationship between miles per gallon and the total cost of the gasoline, which as we expect is an inversely proportional relationship. So that's part B. Part C would be, now we want a two-dimensional table, because if you think about, most likely either my miles per gallon could vary or my price of gas could vary, and I can't see both of those on a single graph. Number of miles could vary, but we can solve that by just asking ourselves, well, what's the price per mile? If we can do the price per mile, then I can, of course, multiply that number by however long my trip is. So that's going to be our strategy on this one. So we're going to type in MPG and then \price. And notice there's, that's just our way of showing that I'm going to put miles per gallon on this column and price on this row. And since we want miles per gallon on this column, I'm going to go from 10 to 60 in increments of 2. Let's see, we can see there's 60, so that should be far enough. I can center that. And then I want my price of gas to start at $2. And I want to go by quarters, all the way up to, say, $5.50. Okay. And if you like to emphasize that these are the fixed values, we can bold all these. And then what we're interested in is seeing how does the price per mile vary on these two variables. And so the nice thing is I just need to type in one formula. And the formula, as before, is the number of miles, which in this case is 1, divided by the MPG, which is A2, times the price of the gas, B1. And so we can see if your car gets 10 miles to the gallon and gas costs $2 a gallon, then you're going to average 20 cents per mile driving that car. Now, we want to use this formula for this whole grid. So here's where Excel is really powerful if you know what to do. I can use the same dragging feature as before, but notice I'm getting nonsense. I'm getting $11 per mile, which of course doesn't make sense. And that's because Excel tries to read our mind of what we mean. And you can see in the formula here that Excel is not keeping the column and the row fixed. So we need to tell Excel to fix those two values. And the way I do that is, since I don't want the A to change, I put a $ in front of the A because I always want the first column. And I put a $ in front of the 1 because I always want the first row. And now if I drag this over, now notice I get numbers that actually make sense. 20 cents per mile at $2 a gallon, 50 cents per mile at $5 a gallon. And what's more, I can drag this down to however far we need to go, down to 60 mpg. And notice now we have a table that quickly gives us the answer for whatever scenario we're driving in. We can quickly see how much our car is going to cost us per mile. So if on the highway my car gets 40 miles to the gallon and gas is about $3 per gallon, then that's going to be column F, 17. And so right now, for a car like that, it would cost 8 cents per mile to drive it on the highway. And notice the formula has changed. The A is still A, but the row has changed to 17. The column has changed to F, but the row here is still 1 because of the $signs. In fact, if I hit Control tilde, you can see how all the formulas change. And so you can just kind of browse those numbers and see how some things change and some things don't. And so this idea of using absolute cell references that freeze certain cells, certain parts of the address, is a really helpful way to get a formula that does the sort of thing that we wanted to do. And then if I want to go back, I hit Control tilde again. So this is a nice way of implementing this simple model if we didn't want to have a calculator with us to make these calculations. So that's it for this section. There's a lot more you can do a spreadsheet. We're just scratching the surface, and there's, of course, online resources and the help feature and various ways of learning how to do those things. But we will do more with a spreadsheet in our next video, so we'll see you there.